The first thing Gloria Bennett noticed that night was the cold. Not normal winter cold. Not the kind that crept in through old windows and settled quietly into the walls. This cold felt deliberate, cruel, punishing. Gloria's eyes opened in the darkness, and for a moment she thought it was just her arthritis again. At 78, pain had a way of waking her before dawn. But this wasn't pain. This was the air itself. Sharp, bitter, wrong. She sat up slowly in bed and looked toward the radiator beneath the window. It was silent, dead silent. Her heart dropped. No, she whispered. She reached for the lamp and clicked it on. Soft yellow light filled the small bedroom she had shared with her husband for more than 40 years. The room was modest, but every corner carried a memory. Their wedding photo sat in a silver frame on the nightstand. A Bible rested beneath Isaiah's glasses. The floral curtains she'd sewn herself still hung by the window. This room had held a lifetime. And now it felt like a freezer. Gloria turned quickly toward the other side of the bed. Isaiah? Quote. Her husband stirred weakly beneath two blankets. At 81, Isaiah Bennett still carried the broad shoulders of the man who had spent 35 years fixing city buses. But age and sickness had softened him. Winter was hard on his lungs. Tonight, even breathing looked like work. It's cold, he whispered, his voice thin. Thought maybe I was dreaming it. Gloria's chest tightened. She slipped into her house shoes and hurried into the hallway. The apartment was freezing. She touched the thermostat. Nothing. No blinking light. No heat. She rushed into the kitchen and turned the faucet. Only a weak spit of water came out. Her stomach dropped. Not just the heat. Again. The landlord had done this before. Short outages. Sudden maintenance issues, unexplained utility problems. But never in the middle of a bitter January night. Never like this. Then came the sound. Bang, bang, bang. Gloria nearly dropped the flashlight she had just grabbed from the kitchen drawer. Someone was pounding on their front door. Not knocking. Pounding. Isaiah called weakly from the bedroom. Gloria? Quote. Her pulse hammered. Who is it? She shouted. No answer. Only the sharp metallic sound of a key sliding into the lock. Her blood turned to ice. The door opened before she could reach it. Two men in dark maintenance jackets sighed without permission. One held a clipboard. The other shined a flashlight across the walls. The furniture. The family photos. Like they were inspecting abandoned property. Gloria planted herself in front of them. You can't just walk in here. Quote. Then he appeared behind them. Harold Whitmore. Tailored black coat. Leather gloves. Expensive shoes that had never touched struggle. His expression was calm, polished, and completely without shame. He stepped into their apartment like he owned the air. And legally, he thought he did. What are you doing in my home? Gloria demanded. Harold glanced around the room slowly. His eyes lingered on the old sofa, the crocheted blanket, the medicine bottles on the side table, the framed military certificate on the wall from Isaiah's service. Disgust flickered across his face. We're conducting a building inspection, he said coolly. At midnight? Quote. If necessary. Gloria stared at him. You shut off our heat. Harold adjusted his cufflinks. If the system is down, I'm sure it's temporary. By then Isaiah had made it into the hallway. One hand braced against the wall. Breathing hard. Harold looked at him and frowned. Not with concern, but irritation. Like old age offended him. Like sickness was inconvenient. Then he said the sentence Gloria would never forget. People paying real money don't want to live in a building that still looks like this. For one long, awful second, the apartment went silent. Gloria felt the words hit her like a slap. Because he wasn't talking about the furniture. He wasn't talking about the carpet. He meant them. Their blackness. Their age. Their presence in a neighborhood men like him had decided no longer belonged to people like them. Her hands shook. "We raised our children in this apartment," she said, voice low and trembling. "We paid rent here before you ever touched this building." Harold didn't care. He only gave a small, thin smile. "This property is changing," he said. "And some tenants simply no longer fit the future." The future. That was the word people used when they wanted to erase the past. When Harold and his men finally left, the cold somehow felt worse. Isaiah sat down on the sofa, coughing into his hand. Gloria wrapped another blanket around his shoulders and rubbed his fingers between her palms. Outside, Baltimore glittered with new money. Rooftop bars, luxury signs, polished glass condos where old books on her wall. Thomas in his first school uniform. Renee at her graduation. Christmas 1994. Sunday dinners. A life. A home. Not luxury. Not wealth. But dignity. And Harold Whitmore looked at all of it like it was trash standing in the way of profit. Gloria rose to check the front door one last time before returning to bed. Then she froze. The screws around the lock looked new. Too new. Her fingers trembled as she touched the metal. Something had been changed. Tampered with. She turned slowly toward Isaiah. His tired eyes met hers. And when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Baby, I think he's trying to kill us out of here." Gloria looked back at the door. And for the first time that night, she believed it. By morning, the apartment still felt like a refrigerator. Gloria Bennett stood at the kitchen sink in 2 sweaters, wool socks, and Isaiah's old robe wrapped over her nightgown, trying to warm her hands around a mug of tea that had gone cold too fast outside the window. January light fell across the street in pale gray sheets, making Baltimore look tired. Inside, Isaiah was coughing again. That sound had become the rhythm of her fear. She looked toward the living room, where her husband sat hunched beneath 3 blankets on the sofa. His inhaler rested on the side table beside the Bible and his reading glasses. He gave her a weak smile when he caught her watching. "I'm all right," he said. But Gloria knew the difference between all right and a man trying not to scare his wife. At 9:12 a.m., no answer. At 9:26, she called again. At 9:41, someone finally picked up. "Whitmore Residential," a cheerful young woman said. "Our heat is still off," Gloria said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "And the water pressure is barely working." A pause. Then, "We don't have any record of a maintenance request from your unit." Gloria closed her eyes. "I'm making one now." Another pause. Then the woman lowered her voice. "Ma'am, your floor is under redevelopment review." Gloria gripped the phone tighter. "What does that have to do with heat?" Quote. The woman hesitated. Then she said quietly, "I'm sorry," and hung up. That afternoon, Gloria went downstairs to the lobby with Isaiah's medicine list in her purse and anger burning behind her ribs. The ashberry used to smell like lemon cleaner in somebody's Sunday roast. Now it smelled like fresh paint and money. The old front desk had been replaced with white marble. A gold sign on the wall read "Luxury Reimagined." Gloria stood in front of it for a long moment. Luxury. As if the people who had built their lives here were somehow the opposite. As she turned toward the elevators, she stopped cold. Harold Whitmore was standing near the entrance with a young white couple in expensive coats, giving them a tour. He smiled as he gestured around the lobby. "We're almost finished clearing the older units," he said. "Once that section is updated, the building will finally match the neighborhood's future." Gloria froze. The young couple nodded politely. Harold kept talking. "It's all about the tenant profile," he added. "The right image matters." His eyes flicked toward Gloria for just half a second. Long enough. Sharp enough. Cruel enough. She understood every word he didn't say. Her throat tightened, but she lifted her chin and kept walking. Back upstairs. She sat at the kitchen table in silence for a long time. Then she opened the junk drawer and pulled out an old brown leather notebook. It had once belonged to Isaiah. He used to keep bus routes and repair notes in it before retirement. The cover was worn soft with age. The pages were yellowed at the edges. Gloria ran her fingers over it carefully. Then she picked up a pen. At the top of the first page, she wrote, January 14th. Heat shut off overnight. Water pressure reduced. Illegal entry after midnight. Witness, Isaiah Bennett. She underlined the date twice. Then she kept going. Time. Words spoken. Number of men who entered. Description of coats. Exact sentence Harold had used. By evening, she had written 3 full pages. At dinner, Isaiah watched her from the sofa. You think that little notebook's gonna save us? He asked softly. Gloria didn't look up. Maybe not today, she said. But one day, somebody's gonna have to listen. That night, she tucked the notebook into the kitchen cabinet behind the flour and canned beans. And over the next 2 weeks, she filled it. Every missing letter from the mailbox. Every accidental utility outage. Every late night knock. Every police visit after false noise complaints. Every maintenance request ignored. Then one afternoon, she came home from the pharmacy and stopped dead in the doorway. Someone was inside. Harold. He stood in their living room wearing leather gloves, flipping through papers on the side table. Their rent receipts. Isaiah's medical bills. Thomas's old school records in a faded folder. What are you doing? Gloria shouted. Harold looked up without even flinching. Verifying occupancy. In my home? Quote. He calmly took out his phone and snapped a photo of the table. Then another. And another. Gloria's whole body shook with rage. Get out. Harold slid the phone into his coat pocket and smiled like he enjoyed her humiliation. You should really start preparing, he said. This unit won't be yours much longer. Then he walked past her and out the door. That night, Gloria didn't cry. She sat at the kitchen table, opened the notebook, and wrote for nearly an hour. When she was done, she closed it gently. Then she walked to the mailbox one last time before bed. Inside was a white envelope with the building's logo stamped in gold. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. At the top, in bold black letters, were the words, Formal Eviction Notice. And when she looked up, Harold Whitmore was standing across the lobby, smiling at her. The morning after the eviction notice arrived, Gloria sat at the kitchen table with Isaiah, staring at the envelope as if it had grown teeth. The city outside was quiet, but the silence inside the apartment was heavy, suffocating. Isaiah's hands shook slightly as he poured his morning coffee, the steam curling lazily in the frigid air. His breath was ragged from the cold nights, from the stress that had settled like dust in every corner of the apartment. We can't just pack up, Gloria whispered. This is our home. Isaiah sighed, taking her hand. I know, baby, but what can we do against him? Quote. Gloria looked down at her notebook sitting beside her mug, the leather worn, pages thick with evidence of harassment. Every incident. Every false complaint, every time Harold had entered their apartment illegally, all written in meticulous detail. She had kept the notebook for 2 weeks now, and it had become more than just a record. It was a lifeline, a shield, and perhaps the only thing standing between them and losing everything. She touched the cover reverently. We fight, she said. We don't run. We fight with this. Isaiah nodded slowly, pride and fear warring in his eyes. You're braver than I am. Gloria. That afternoon, Gloria made calls to former neighbors, community members, and tenant advocates. She documented every conversation, names, times, promises. They all went into her notebook. She cross-referenced the dates of utility shutoffs with building maintenance records. She had even started taking photos of their apartment's condition, so Harold could not claim the Bennett apartment was unsafe or uncared for. Her fingers shook from writing so much, but she refused to stop. Every entry was a declaration. We exist, we are not invisible. You cannot erase us. Meanwhile, Harold's harassment escalated. Notices of routine inspections arrived in the mail multiple times a week. Some mornings, their water would sputter for hours. One night, Isaiah awoke to footsteps in the hall. Peering through the peephole, he saw Harold's men loitering outside, whispering, laughing. But Gloria refused to panic. She refused to let fear dictate their actions. And that night, she made a quiet decision. I'm going to prepare everything for court, she told Isaiah as they sat under layers of blankets. We may not have money for fancy lawyers, but we have truth, and the truth will matter. Isaiah placed a trembling hand over hers. Our son, he could help. Gloria shook her head. Thomas is busy. I don't want to drag him into this. Let him live his life. But Thomas's presence lingered in her mind. He worked in the courthouse downtown. She remembered watching him as a boy, organizing legal pads and practicing arguments with his toy gavel. If anyone could see the weight of injustice, it would be him. Still, she resisted, choosing instead to rely on her notebook, her evidence, and the strength she had always carried. Days turned into a week. Each encounter with Harold or his staff left them exhausted. Gloria began sleeping lightly, her dreams full of footsteps and muffled laughter, of eviction notices strewn across their apartment, of being forced onto the street after 42 years. Through it all, the Bennetts remained dignified. Gloria would wake early, notebook in hand, documenting every new action, every remark, every instance of intimidation. Isaiah would watch her, sometimes offering a quiet smile, sometimes leaning back and letting out a slow breath as if trying to expel the tension that hung in the air. And then one afternoon, a friend from their church stopped by, a retired tenant advocate named Ms. Louise. Sharp and kind-eyed, noticed Gloria's notebook lying open on the table. You're not just writing a diary, honey, she said. You're building a case. You've got to take this fight to court. They can't ignore what you've documented. Gloria nodded. I know. I want to be ready. Everything has to be right. That's why you keep every paper, every receipt, every witness statement. You've got them now. Don't waste a second thinking anyone will believe your story if you don't show them proof. That night, Gloria and Isaiah sat quietly, notebook between them, both aware that the moment to act was nearing. Harold Whitmore would not stop. His arrogance would not allow it. The Bennetts had to prepare themselves to face him, to face the court, and to face the possibility that their dignity alone might not be enough. But they had each other. They had decades of life together. And most importantly, they had the secret weapon they had not yet used. Their son, Thomas Bennett, working in the legal system. Gloria touched the notebook and whispered softly, "We've survived worse than him. And now, it's time to show it." That night, the Bennetts laid out their notebooks, photographs, receipts, and witness statements, preparing meticulously for the fight that was coming. For the first time in weeks, there was a small, flickering hope in the cold apartment. And yet, just before bedtime, Gloria opened the mailbox once more. Another white envelope, another notice. This one stamped urgent, Harold's signature printed in bold. Gloria swallowed hard and turned to Isaiah. Her voice was steady, though her chest felt tight. He thinks we're scared. He's about to find out. He couldn't be more wrong. The morning of the hearing, Gloria and Isaiah arrived at the courthouse dressed with quiet dignity. Gloria wore her best coat, the one she had saved for church, and Isaiah's hands were neatly folded over his cane. Their breaths formed tiny clouds in the crisp January air as they walked through the steps, the city around them oblivious to the storm inside their hearts. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with routine energy. Lawyers whispered, clerks shuffled papers, and Harold Whitmore entered last, looking smug and confident. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floors, his tailored suit impeccable, his coffee in hand. He greeted his attorney with a smile that meant, "This is already over." Gloria tightened her grip on her notebook. Each page contained the story of their suffering. Dates of utility shutoffs, false police complaints, illegal entries, racist remarks, and witness statements meticulously recorded over weeks. It was their life on paper. The courtroom clerk called the room to order. Everyone rose. Gloria and Isaiah straightened instinctively. Then the doors at the far end opened, and the presiding judge entered. Gloria's heart stopped. There, walking calmly to the bench, robes flowing, was Thomas Bennett, their son, the same Thomas who had been away at the courthouse for years. The one who had always loved law but never boasted about it. Harold froze mid-step, his confident smile faltering. Recognition hit him like a freight train. Gloria's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Isaiah's hand found hers. Harold's attorney whispered urgently, but Harold only stood, pale and speechless, realizing the presiding magistrate was the son of the very couple he had tried to humiliate. Thomas glanced briefly at his parents and nodded subtly, maintaining professionalism. No theatrics, no bias, just calm, measured authority. The hearing began. Gloria presented her evidence first. She recited each incident with care. Every utility cut, every unauthorized entry, every threatening remark. Each item in her notebook had a corresponding photo or witness statement. Isaiah corroborated, describing nights spent in freezing apartments. The fear, the humiliation. Harold attempted to interject, but Thomas allowed only the facts to be presented. Each violation, each harassing action, was undeniable. The weight of decades of abuse bore down on Harold, and the courtroom's atmosphere shifted. His confidence eroded with every page Gloria and Isaiah submitted. Then Thomas spoke. His voice was calm, steady, and deliberate. The documentation submitted demonstrates a pattern of harassment, illegal entry, and discriminatory behavior. The court finds sufficient cause to issue immediate protective measures. He ordered a temporary restraining order, immediate restoration of utilities, and a freeze on Harold's management authority pending further investigation. Gloria and Isaiah remained seated, holding hands, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. Relief and shock mingled in equal measure. Harold's face was a mask of disbelief. He opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to protest, but Thomas's gaze silenced him. The courtroom was quiet, the tension almost tangible. Even the attorneys paused, realizing the tide had turned. By the time the session concluded, Harold was led outside by investigators waiting in the hall. His empire of intimidation, built on arrogance and racism, was crumbling. Gloria and Isaiah left the courtroom slowly, their hands entwined, hearts beating with a mixture of fear and triumph. Outside, the winter sun had begun to peek through the clouds. Gloria whispered to Isaiah, "We kept our home, we kept our dignity, and soon, everyone will know the truth." Isaiah squeezed her hand. "And our son. He did this for us. Not as a favor, but because the truth demanded it." For the first time in weeks, they felt the weight lift. Not completely. Harold's influence still loomed, but justice had taken its first decisive step. The Bennetts were no longer alone. Their voices, their courage, and their evidence had begun to turn the tide. And as they stepped out into the cold winter air, Gloria glanced back at the courthouse. The fight wasn't entirely over, but the hardest battle, proving their existence, their worth, their right to be treated with dignity, was finally being recognized. Months passed after the courtroom revelation. Gloria and Isaiah returned to their apartment, now warm, safe, and alive with quiet victory. Repairs had been made, their heat worked reliably, and the water flowed freely. Yet, the emotional scars of months of harassment remained, etched into their hearts like invisible ink. Harold Whitmore's downfall continued beyond the courthouse walls. Federal investigators pursued the case of discriminatory tenant practices. More tenants came forward, stories of harassment and intimidation intertwining with Gloria's meticulous records. Each notebook entry, every photograph, every witness statement became evidence in a growing legal storm that Harold could not escape. Inside their apartment, Gloria sat at the kitchen table once more. Her leather notebook, now filled with nearly 50 pages of incidents and proofs, rested before her like a sacred document. Isaiah brewed tea, the aroma filling the space with a sense of normalcy they had not felt in months. "You know," Isaiah said quietly, "we didn't just survive him. We changed the rules. We made sure he can't do this to anyone else." Gloria smiled softly, brushing her hand over the notebook. "We gave him proof he couldn't ignore. And our children, they'll remember how to stand up for what's right." Thomas visited regularly, quietly checking in, offering legal guidance, but mostly just being present. He didn't boast, he simply shared small smiles with his parents, relief and pride mingling in his gaze. The city around them had begun to shift as well. The Bennett's story inspired neighbors and local tenants. Community meetings discussed tenant protections and rights. Gloria and Isaiah's fight became more than personal. It became a symbol, a catalyst for the Bennett Housing Dignity Act, a new policy aimed at strengthening tenant protections against discrimination and harassment in rental housing. One Sunday, as sunlight poured through the curtains, the Bennetts gathered their children and grandchildren for a quiet meal. Laughter bounced off the walls, a melody that had been absent for too long. The apartment, once a space of fear, now felt alive with warmth, memory, and continuity. Gloria held her notebook in her lap, reflecting on the long journey. Every entry, every painstakingly recorded detail, had mattered. Every small act of courage, every refusal to bow to intimidation, had mattered. They had turned suffering into strength, fear into evidence, and humiliation into justice. Isaiah reached across the table, taking her hand. "You kept us alive," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You kept our dignity. You kept our home. I don't know how I could have done it without you." Gloria smiled through tears. "We did it together, baby. Always together." And outside, the neighborhood continued to change. But the Bennetts remained, not just in their apartment, but in the hearts of those who had followed their story, who had witnessed their courage, who had learned that age, race, or circumstance could never diminish truth or dignity. As Gloria placed the notebook into a small wooden box on the shelf, a testament to their struggle and their victory, she whispered softly, "They tried to erase us from the home we built, but instead, our story began. The law changed." Isaiah squeezed her hand, and for the first time in months, they both breathed fully. The fight was over, their legacy secured, their family whole, and their home theirs to keep.